Well, everyone went ahead and got really quiet here, so I guess we'll go ahead and get started. It is my pleasure to introduce someone whose name many of you might have seen a few times walking around campus, Chou. Kevin is a serial entrepreneur. He's a UC Berkeley trustee. He's a climate advocate. And he co-founded Kabam, a company that he grew into more than $1 billion mobile gaming company with over $400 million in annual revenue. He went on to found Gen G, a leading esports organization, and Rally, a blockchain platform. But now Kevin has joined the light side and has gone over to lead BrightSaver. And it is a nonprofit that brings affordable plug-in solar technology to American households. And the organization just recently, I think, shaped Utah, passing unanimously a new law that allows plug-in solar in the state of Utah. And how many states are you actually working on right now?
29 as of today.
29. So first, a big welcome to Kevin Chou.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here today.
No, thank you, and thanks for both your service to the climate and your service to Berkeley. We appreciate it. So, Kevin, it'd be great to start with your story. You grew up in Moorpark, California. You're the son of Taiwanese immigrants, and you went on to build these amazing companies. Can you take us back to the beginning and sort of what led you to be an entrepreneur?
I guess I'll share two stories. The first story is my father was a computer science scientist. He worked in the defense industry. So he was always playing around with kind of different computer hardware. And a lot of times, I guess at work, they would have some really old systems. They'd be throwing it away. He'd pick it up and bring it home. And so he'd bring home a floppy drive thing or a hard drive thing or a really old monitor. And so we just had a room full of all these old computer equipment. And I just thought, I'm going to try to take all this old stuff and assemble it into a computer and see if I could sell it. And so I took all these old components, put them together, and was able to sell them for a few $100s. And I was like, my dad pays me $1 to mow the lawn. I'd rather, make one of these computers and sell it. And that's like mowing the lawn 500 times or whatever. And so I felt a real sense of empowerment from this idea of, I could take this thing that was not thrown away by the company. My dad wasn't even using it, so I got a chance to pick it up. And the idea that I could take all this old stuff, recycle it, build some value into it, and then sell it, and then make some reasonable money was a really empowering thing for me as a teenager. So that was kind of my first taste of it. Unfortunately, I didn't go on to have didn't build it into a bigger thing, but that was really fun. And then the second was, when I graduated from Berkeley, I thought I wanted to, be in finance. And so I went to go work on Wall Street at Deutsche Bank Alex Brown in technology M&A. And I just really did not like it. My associate, for those of you who are unfamiliar with investment banking, it's very hierarchical. And so I was at the very bottom of the totem pole, and I would work on this PowerPoint presentation, and I would give it to my associate. He said, this font, on the other pages, it's a smaller font. Could you change this from a 12-point font to an 11-point font? So I kind of do that, reprint all the books, give it to the vice president, and then the vice president would say, I don't know, this font it's blue, and we've been using black on these other pages. Can you go make it all black? And so I go do that. And I give it to the managing director, and he'd say, the font's too small. Make it bigger, and then change this. Let's make it all black so it's more readable. And I go change it all back, to the original format. And so I don't know. I just felt like I didn't know what I was doing, and I didn't really understand the broader context. And I really just my first job coming out of college, I kind of realized I don't know if I'm a good employee. And so I kind of thought back to building these computers, and I thought, that's kind of the path I wanted to eventually explore. So that's eventually, it was kind of a pull and then a push against the working for a big company kind of deal.
So you've not only been an entrepreneur, but you've been really good at finding things kind of on the bleeding edge. You were in mobile gaming before it was really big. You were in blockchain, about 10 years ago. and now you're on this, it's not entirely new, but new to the United States, this movement of plug-in solar. Can you talk about sort of like what attracts you to these sort of frontier type areas that you work in, and why you like working in that space?
I think I think it goes back to not being a good rule follower, and so I think when I was here at Berkeley and I was going through my my Haas program, we learned in econ class that there is perfect competition on one hand. So if you start a restaurant, in a crowded street full of restaurants, that's kind of perfect competition. Now, on the other hand, you've got a perfect monopoly where you have full control over a specific business unit. And I thought, I think working at to me, the beauty was actually creating something else that was off that, sort of line of something that was truly innovative and not having to compete against anybody else. So I think one of the things about being on the frontier is that you're not necessarily competing against somebody else. You really try to define a new thing that doesn't quite exist yet. And I think that to me has always been really attractive for me. Mm-hmm. And so I think that is, I'm not great at details. I like bigger picture thinking and the idea of going after something that doesn't quite exist yet, but it's right in front of us is really attractive. And then I don't have to compete against anybody else to do it.
Well, so let's talk about that frontier that you're on right now, with BrightSaber. So you and I talked about this a little bit, and you had said that this was kind of a way for consumers to actually experience being a part of this energy revolution, directly, and actually experience it. What brought you to this, and can you tell us a little bit more about its genesis and sort of what you guys are working on right now? And starting with why were you interested in plug-in solar?
I took a year. And I wish I had gone through the MCS class or program. But
you still can. There's room for you next year.
I gotta piece together my own. I'd love, that'd be awesome. So I went through and kind of pieced together my own climate learning, and because I just thought it would be the biggest challenge for my kids' generation, and I wanted to really understand the science, behind it. And of course, I'm going to go through the roller coaster and go through all the dismay and the, about where it's all heading and kind of how much we've done or the lack of how much we're making progress. And then the most optimistic, then I came across, of course, this idea of electrifying everything. And that to me was a really empowering and energizing solution that I thought, this is a way forward where we're not asking people to sacrifice and just say, eat less beef or do things to make sacrifice. And I think some of that is going to be necessary. But this idea of electrifying everything and that EVs would just be a better car than an internal combustion engine, or that electric heat pumps would be better at heating and cooling. I was like, this technology is going, there's going to be new technologies that's here and now, and all of this can start with clean energy, be powered by clean energy. If we can do that, we could really decarbonize quite a bit of human civilization footprint, and that to me was really exciting. And I thought that was the future that I wanted to work towards. And I didn't really quite know how to do it, and I kept studying, and of course I was somehow drawn to the energy side of things. And in energy, a lot of things in energy is very complicated. You have both the way that energy was set up and the way it's regulated and the way that the wholesale markets and all these, the way utilities are set up, the incentives for the utilities, it's all very complicated. And it felt like there wasn't a way to make a change or make an impact, within the energy markets, where that'd be very complicated. And and I thought back to my own journey as a consumer, where I wanted to get rooftop solar. My roof is shaded by some beautiful trees. I was not going to cut down the trees to put solar. And I was like, I can't get it. And this is something that I would love to get. And so all of that led me to balcony solar that was taking off in Germany. And then that led me to what was happening in Pakistan, where the economy has been growing tremendously. But the energy use at the grid level has been going down because so many people are just basically going out and buying solar panels and energy storage systems and hooking them up to their homes and businesses. And I just thought, wow, if this is already starting in both a very developed economy as well as an emerging economy, this is really exciting. And I think we're at that cycle now where with Wright's Law and the cost of solar modules coming down so much and will continue to keep going down, that it's just more economical at this point to create new energy from solar and battery. And I think instead of just letting our governments be the only ones to facilitate this, I just thought there should be a way that consumers can make choice. And if we could get the economics will become more and more favorable for consumers. We just need to figure out how do we enable the market and catalyze it so that consumers can participate in this directly.
And so you saw this, and there was a huge barrier right in the way. What was it, and how did you sort of start thinking about overcoming it?
It comes down to something called an interconnection agreement. And so interconnection is basically a utility's way to say that, hey, we're a monopoly. We own all energy generation and delivery in this geographic area. And if you want to generate energy, you need this thing called an interconnection agreement to generate that energy. And that made sense when energy generation was a larger, when you were putting a big diesel backup generator or something else that could be, or even 10 kilowatts on your roof, that probably makes sense. But I think as we look at, as the economics of these solar modules continue to go down, and the ability to create a consumer-sized energy generation device, I think the idea of being able to go through this interconnection agreement was just ridiculous. It's sort of like saying, you go through a very complex process to drive an 18-wheeler as a commercial truck driver, but if you want to ride a bicycle, you don't go through that process, right? And so this was much more like a bicycle, but we were forcing, consumers to go through this much more complicated process. And so we identified this point and we said, all right, let's go figure out how do we remove this interconnection requirement. And this happened to fall state by state as opposed to federally. And we said, all right, let's just go do this work state by state. And so it was kind of this long circuitous route of just continually asking why, pulling on the thread until we figured out, okay, this is the blocker at this moment in time. And then we started BrightSaver to do that.
You sound like you could have come out of one of our classes. So I think we should give you maybe an honorary degree, MCS degree, because I think you would have passed several just with that response. So you're an entrepreneur. You see the law needs to be changed. You see this happen. So what do you do? And you, Kevin, you're not necessarily a policy advocate. This isn't your jam. What made you decide that you wanted to go out and build an organization to actually fix this?
Part of it is I was drawn to learning about a new field. I'd never done anything in policy before. The few months that I spent really trying to ask, why, within the energy sector, I learned that if I want to do work within energy, policy was going to be really like the important lever to move first. And so I think that part of it was being drawn to trying something new. Mm-hmm. I think at this point in my life, I'm less motivated by a financial outcome or just trying to get more and more and more, but instead really trying to figure out something that I felt like had real purpose, that could have real impact, and something that, when I looked around and tried to understand why this wasn't happening in the United States, there was nobody else doing this work. And so I just said, why not me? And I'm in a position where I can probably make that impact. And so I just decided to jump in.
So can you tell us a little bit about how you put together BrightSaver, what it looks like, what your work is right now, what's on your plate?
Yeah, so BrightSaver is a little bit unique. We do think about ourselves as a technology nonprofit. And that means that we try to think about how do we have massive scale beyond the very specific work that we're doing. And I haven't talked about this publicly, and we're still working through the strategy. But I do think that we're
Not for attribution, everyone. Yeah.
we do. We try to think about how do we, an advocacy organization, and there's a few really great solar advocacy organizations in the United States, and we've gotten to know them all, and they operate off of tiny budgets. Tiny budgets. And we're talking about $1 to $2 million budgets. And these are the best organizations in the United States that operate like this. And then on the other hand, I've seen what organizations that have a really interesting earned income model can do. And so when I look at a nonprofit approach and kind of think about how do we make a big impact in decarbonization and clean energy generation, I think it's really important to do the policy work and have an advocacy arm that can work with lawmakers and organizations across the United States to make policy impact, because we're going to make the biggest impact there. But then we think a lot about how do we create an earned income model so that we're not just always asking foundations and philanthropists for more money to fund our work. And so we try to put together a model where we have an earned income revenue model that powers the advocacy side of what we do. And I think when that really works well, it looks like, a AAA. Or it looks like there's a few models that AARP gets referred to quite a bit as well. The NRA, as much as I hate saying that, but it's a
good membership model. It works.
It's a great membership model. They're incredibly effective with political advocacy. And there's no organization that does that for climate, for clean energy, for decarbonization. And so we're trying to figure out how do we put together these two really powerful things to make impact at scale that compounds over time.
And so when you're saying these two powerful things, you're saying actually access to rooftop solar and the advocacy that would continue to enable it?
Yeah, so plug-in solar as kind of the first step.
Sorry, plug-in solar, rooftop solar.
Rooftop solar is great, by the way.
We're
huge fans of rooftop solar as well. It's just all solar. It's just like we need more of it. But it's how do we give consumers more ability to participate in the transition to decarbonization and sustainability, and create a repeatable model that can scale as we serve more and more people. And part of this, of course, is having the policy, removing some of the red tape in the policy such that consumers can actually make choices and it's easier. And that ideally we get to a point where, for example, in California, if you could just go buy one of these systems, you would get paid back in 2 years. It'd be one of the best financial investments you could make without any subsidies from the government. And so how do we ride that cost curve? And it's only going to get cheaper. It will be the year after that, the plug-in solar systems will be even cheaper still. And so we're going to ride this cost curve just like televisions and Wi-Fi routers and home appliances, where you just expect it to get better and cheaper every single year. And that's going to be energy generation and storage. We're right at that cusp right now. And we just need to unlock that market. And once we unlock that market, how do we build a sustainable business model where we can advocate for other decarbonization initiatives?
So this has taken a really different approach than, say, rooftop solar and battery storage, which has gotten a lot of critiques for essentially being predominantly bought, or EVs, predominantly bought by wealthy people in wealthy neighborhoods in expensive homes. This is kind of going in the opposite direction. Can you talk about sort of how you see this sort of creating accessibility and equity to clean energy for people of different incomes?
All right. That's a great question. I think the equity question is really important. And I think if we want, when I think about energy and decarbonization, it's going to take individuals at a very large scale and impact making decisions that are both good for themselves as well as good for society, as well as being knowledgeable and informed to then generate the political willpower to make long-term investments, in the right areas. And I think one of the challenges that I've seen with this administration, coming in and wiping out all of the IRA, major pillars of the IRA, and really not having much of a fight, is that there's not much consumer awareness and knowledge of clean energy. Mm-hmm. And so, and some of the stuff does take a long time. And so, some of those policies would have rolled down to millions of people, but, they were killed before. But I think part of this challenge is that most 95+% of Americans have never had any experience with any clean energy, have never seen a solar panel up close. We get questions like, is it okay if my kid plays around the solar panel? Like, will they get electrocuted if they just accidentally touch the solar panel? We have like, oh, is it okay if I have a pet at home and my pet like climbs on top of the solar panel? Are they going to get electrocuted? So we just have like, there's just a lot of confusion about this technology, even though it's been around for decades and decades, and just people haven't seen it. And so, what happens when a new administration comes in and wipes away all the things that we fought for is that there hasn't really been much of a fight at all because people don't really know about it.
Yeah. And do you think that this will change? Do you think this will be what the unlock, the technological sort of consumer intersection unlock that will change perception?
I think so. So I've talked to a lot of rooftop solar homeowners. And so when NEM 3 came around, there was a huge fight in California because people who had taken that step and made that leap, they and done all the research and understood the economics and made a financial decision, they really wanted to fight for, it became a really hot political issue. And I think the more people that we get exposed to clean energy and the more that we're going to get people fighting for that type of future.
Fantastic. So last question is more of a personal one. You gave back to Berkeley at a really young age. You're most of the people, I go to sometimes these alumni donor events at Berkeley, and the average age is more like a senior citizen's home. You actually, you went ahead and made a big gift and actually supported this university very early. What inspired you to actually give back to Berkeley so young?
For me, it was I had a little bit of a rough childhood, and that in my high school years, my father was laid off. We had a lot of financial stress. And when I got to, I was accepted at Berkeley, but I didn't know how I'd pay for it. And so I came to campus and I just went over to Sproul. And I don't know if it's still, the financial aid office is still at Sproul, but back then it was. And I literally I didn't know what to do, but I sat there and tried to talk to people. And I had a financial aid officer sort of take real interest in my, say, hey, I've got a little bit of time, I'll take you in and tell me what's going on. And he reworked my entire financial aid. I literally just dropped into Sproul and spent an hour with this person who reworked my entire financial aid and said, hey, here's the things that you got to go do. You go apply for this program and resubmit this thing with your dad's unemployment and all this other stuff. And so I basically said at that time, if I ever had enough, if I ever made enough money, I would make a gift to Berkeley. I didn't know what that was, back then. And then fast forward about 15 years, I had come across, I was in a position to make a gift, and it just felt like the right thing to do, at that time. So I think I was 34 at the time, and looking back, all my friends told me I was crazy, but I was like, this just feels like the right thing to do. Berkeley has given me so much, and I certainly wouldn't be here where I am and have all the opportunities that I've had without having gone through the Berkeley experience.
Well, we all appreciate your generosity, and I know everyone has sat in the building that you gave and done things like Clean Tech to Market, and so we appreciate it, and thank you for your leadership, and thank you for your leadership on this new project. So let's turn it over to questions for Kevin. If ever you could just stand up or just when you announce yourself, say your name as well. Yes.
Hey, my name's Ben. Thanks for being here. It's good to hear from you. So you started Bright Saver as a nonprofit. Why not start another VC-backed company? Was it like just the best way you thought you could make impact, or just walk me through that?
Yeah. A big part of it was we realized relatively early, as we were considering which legal structure we wanted to pursue, we realized quite early that if we're going to do a bunch of policy work, I think a venture-backed effort would not be the right effort to do that. In addition, as we were talking to a bunch of potential manufacturers, Because we did think, okay, what if we manufacture, design and manufacture a system, or at least outsource our manufacturing for a plug-in solar system? Could we make the economics of that work? What would that market look like? And it became very clear two things. One was that the policy work was going to take years because we had to go through a state legislative cycle. And the second is that it would be a terrible business to be a manufacturer of plug-in solar. Mostly because at this point in time, the supply chains all run through China, and this is even before tariffs. But basically, a lot of the it is a big challenge to be an electronics manufacturer here in the United States and depend on Chinese firms to do the manufacturing. And so I just didn't see a good way to build a for-profit business in this. So that's why I chose nonprofit. But I would say there's one more element, which is I've been running venture-backed companies for 20 years. There's a lot of pressure to deliver back to the shareholders that invest in the company early on. And I think I really wanted to focus on impact first and not financial returns for shareholders first. And so it would be a much harder road to do this as a nonprofit, but I felt like if I could get it working, it could make a very large impact because we wouldn't have to worry about when is the liquidity event, how long could we invest in policy before we really try to turn a profit. I wanted to just 100% focus on impact, and we've been fortunate to be able to put that business model together.
Thank you.
Go ahead. Yeah, please.
Hi, David. So you talked about how solar, the economics are favorable. What if the technology you were working with, the economics were not yet favorable? How would you then engage consumers?
For a lot of technology, one thing that I've realized running both nonprofits and for-profits, that the narrative is so important in the storytelling and trying to get people to believe in what you're doing. And so I don't think certainly the economics are really, really important in asking consumers to do anything. But there is always a niche of consumers that is excited about the new thing. And telling the story right and getting the right audience to believe in your mission and come along with you is really important. And so there are people who will believe in a longer arc, for something. And I think it's really just finding that community, speaking to that community directly and authentically, and starting, just growing that community over time.
So questions on this side?
Hey, I'm Xander, first year MBA MCS. I'm curious, reflecting on your experience as an MBA, if there are any valuable learnings that set you up for your future success in different endeavors, and specifically thinking about the position we're in with maybe a lens towards climate and opportunities you could see there in the future.
Yeah, well, I do think I do think all of I really enjoyed my experience. I went through the undergraduate program, and I think that classes like accounting and economics and corporate finance, I would never want to do that later in my life. I find the people who are working a job and then they're getting more senior in their career, and then they're like, oh my gosh, I don't understand this financial statement. Let me go figure out how to study that. I thought it was really nice that I got that grounding before I needed to deal with that in the workplace. But the second thing I would say, so I think a lot of the more technical classes, in the MBA are certainly incredibly helpful. And then I think the thing that I got the most out of at Berkeley was just being exposed to as many talks and I met a number of VCs. I didn't even know what a venture capitalist was, and in 2002 there was not much of the world knew what venture capitalists did. And so I talked to John Doerr. He came here and gave a talk, and then I was able to kind of chat with him afterwards. And he was really inspirational to me and made me be interested in finance, but also interested in entrepreneurship and the intersection of those two things. And so I think it's just taking advantage of your time here at Berkeley and all the interesting people that are willing to make the trek over to campus and go talk to them and find the things, be exposed to these different worlds that at least I never had considered before. And that was really helpful for me.
Got a ton of questions on this side.
Yeah, please.
I'm curious kind of if there are other climate solutions that you think could benefit from like a similar model to BrightSafer. I thought the kind of nonprofit model there was really interesting.
I'm sure there's a lot. I have not. I think policy work lends itself to nonprofit. You can do it in a for-profit. There's certainly, we work somewhat with Enphase and Tesla and a few others who are sort of interested in our work. But in general, I think policy work definitely lends itself well to nonprofits. But I think I do think a lot of really important work will be done by for-profits. I think having the ability to aggregate capital, build large, systems that change agriculture or change industrial decarbonization, all like really important work, and a lot of that probably should be done as a for-profit. Probably rambling a little bit. I don't have I don't have other great ideas for nonprofits, at the moment.
Hi, thank you for being here. My name is Rachel. So I know you mentioned the earned income revenue model as a way that profits could be more self-sustaining. Obviously, nonprofits are very bottlenecked by the capital that they have or the impact that they could make. Can you give any more examples, or have you come across any more examples where nonprofits can be self-sustaining, or any innovative forms that you think should be implemented?
That's actually an area that I'm trying to learn a lot about right now, and there's not that many. I would say one area that I think there is there's already a bunch of great firms doing this is the environmental litigation area, and I think that there's some very large nonprofits like Environmental Defense Fund and several others that do great work. But I think this idea of an organization that has earned revenue doing climate work, I haven't come across a ton, and I'm trying to find more.
No, it's thin. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's why we're trying to build it. I think there's another one in Vermont that emerged out of Vermont. It's called it's VEIC. I don't know exactly what it stands for. Vermont Energy something. And it is.
It's okay. I was dying anyway.
They design energy systems for public buildings and other things. And so they've had a long history of 2 or 3 decades. So I think they're probably the one firm within clean energy that isn't well known, partly at least here in the West Coast, but I think does great work, as well. But otherwise, I think I am really trying. Sierra Club, in past is more focused on environmental protection, and they do some work in climate. But yeah, it's very thin, very thin.
Kevin, can you just break down in really simple terms what the business model that you're exploring looks like in terms of how you're bundling the purchase of a plug-in system with advocacy, and how that may either looks now and how it may look in the future?
Yeah, so I think so. This is the part that we're still exploring. So we're in the messy part of creating hypothesis, trying to figure out the right way to bring it to market and test the ideas. But I think at the end of the day, a model where a community of people who believe in a thing or need a service that are aligned with the overall mission is, I think, a really powerful model. And I think the Sierra Club did a great job of this in environmental protection, where they had people who really enjoyed the outdoors and wanted to spend time hiking in the outdoors, and they would organize their one of the Sierra Club's main revenue drivers is they organize these nature tours, and you can go on, you can sign up for like a Yosemite tour and all these other things, and they drive revenue from people who enjoy spending time in the outdoors. Then they take that revenue and then they use it for advocacy for nature preservation and restoration and so forth. And so that model doesn't quite exist. And then you have AAA that got started, I think, over 100 years ago at this point in time. And they basically said, all right, well, if you own a vehicle and it breaks down, well, we'll go put together insurance and other services where we'll help you with your vehicle. And then they took that revenue that they generated from that insurance business, and then they advocated for better roads, fixing roads that had issues, and so forth, right? And so I think, and they've made tremendous progress and impact over their 100-year plus history. But there isn't an organization that does that today in the climate space. And at the same time, climate issues are it's a market failure that doesn't quite have, in the past, hasn't had a way to, I think, easily harness the ability to you needed government subsidies, essentially, to invest in technologies and things that could that could, in the future, really make a big impact. But we're at that stage now where the market actually is working. We see it in Pakistan. We see it in Germany, right? These are non-subsidized ways that clean energy adoption is rapidly taking off at scale. And so the question is, could you take that model that's worked in the past for other functional organizations that combine services for people who are interested in that area with an advocacy and policy model that can make very large impact at scale?
Cool. Well, we need it. I think Margot had a question as well.
I'm Margot. Thanks for having me. I'm curious if I'm going to ask Robert on sustainable capitalism in the Nordics. You talk about different cultural and institutional structures in places like Denmark that help companies and more sustainable form of capitalism. I'm curious if they're in like Pakistan and Germany, where you're seeing this too well, if there are other cultural norms that may be able to be transferred toward the US that may make it more successful.
I don't know. I'm really interested in that question myself, so I don't know the answer to that yet. I think I'm actually planning to spend quite a bit of time in Europe as well as Southeastern Asia soon to learn a little bit more about those markets as soon as we get past this legislative cycle here.
A bunch of questions on this side.
Yeah, please.
Hi, Katrina. Thanks for being here. You talked about both the importance of like the narrative in selling this product, then also better about like the economic value prop. I'm curious to hear kind of both your like sales pitch for it and how that's a little bit different from the value prop, because one thing I'm kind of curious about, as you talked about like trying to get consumers more familiar with solar, so people are like scared to touch a solar panel, like whatever it is. I think the value prop of that is like very different from like something like Nest, which I feel like the Nest thermostats, which I feel like is also familiarizing consumers, but pitching a service that's disambiguated from the climate side of it versus you're pitching like a pure, like pure energy as the service. I don't know if that makes sense.
I think so. Let me try to answer your question. I think we lead with we work in we worked in Utah first, and then we now work in a lot of blue states, red states, purple states. And so we first of all, we learned that we need to get climate out of the message. Unfortunately, in this political, 2026, 2025. It was just too polarizing to talk about climate. So we, as we went to market and we tried a few different approaches, we really landed on energy affordability as the number one item that everyone cares about. And so just people are dealing with rising energy costs in many, many states, some a lot more than others. We, of course, suffer from it here in California quite a bit. But then the other one that also resonated really well is energy reliability and energy independence. And so we really, that's the beauty of, I think, this work was part of the reason why we've been able to make such rapid progress so fast has been really focusing on be able to kind of distill it down to a few narratives that worked no matter what the politics in the state. And we still get blocked by utility. We still fight utilities. We still fight a few other opposition for oil and gas, like we do in Hawaii right now. But in general, by focusing on that and also focusing on an equity story where if you're a renter, if you don't have access to your roof, for example, because you live in a multi-tenant dwelling building, you can have access to this because you can now, if you have a balcony that's facing the right way, you can have access to solar. And so I think we just focus on messages that we knew would, and we tested, that became a lot more politically potent than trying to just focus on climate itself. Yeah, another question back there?
Hi, I'm Sandy, also a fellow Scramble Meetings. My question is around sort of the supply chain and solar panels, because they were all familiar that Trump was tariffs on the panel production. I'm curious whether that impacts like how they're seeing and about the operation of NGO and like the water and.
Yeah, what we've seen so far is that it hasn't impacted solar panel pricing that much, actually. And so two things happened. One was that a lot of, because the market in the US was already relatively large, and plug-in solar uses this, you can use the same solar panels as utility scale solar. There's foldable panels and a few other things that are more consumer-ish. In general, for solar panels, the market was large enough in the US where a large part of supply chains basically stockpiled solar panels, number one, so they could have an advantage when the tariffs came in. And so maybe we're still working through a little bit of that inventory, but what we also hear from manufacturers is that they're moving supply chains to Mexico, to Canada, to parts of the US that are better for for assembly and so forth. So I think, and I haven't studied closely what happened with the Supreme Court ruling and how that's going to affect everything. But I think so far we haven't seen much of a difference in solar panel pricing or solar module pricing. We have seen more of an impact on inverters because there is somewhat of a difference between plug-in solar inverters, at least at this point in time in the market, compared to the inverters that are used in big solar farms. And so we see a little bit of a pricing hit there. But I think in general, it's a big enough market. I think it's the tariffs aren't going to make that big of a difference to it. The bigger difference will be the tax credits. That is making a big difference in the market today. Question over there?
All living things for company. I didn't Anthony Catway in the West. It's the question about Emily with the start, right? You start you start gently, now you start what are the things that you look for when you start things, both either favorite these well some what included the market. It's one that causes.
There's very different types of entrepreneurs, and I probably fall into the type of entrepreneur where I love seeing adjacencies and things working. There's some incredible people. I actually have a lot of, I really admire entrepreneurs who have a vision for the future that's far off. And they're willing, they know it's going to be 5 to 10 years to even start to realize that vision, and they work towards it. I'm more of the type of like people working on fusion or something like that right now. I'm more of the entrepreneur that I love seeing something working somewhere adjacent to the problem and then finding a way to bring that solution to market sooner. And I feel like being an entrepreneur is really hard. And so this type of work these types of businesses tend to be, you can make an impact sooner. And I love finding those ways that you can take what's working in this case in Germany and Pakistan and really say, okay, why is this working? Why is this oddly working in these markets and exploding in growth? In Germany, for example, I think it took 15 years. I had this number at the tip of my head, but I think it took about 15 years for the market to reach 1 million rooftop solar deployments. And Germany hit that number in 3 years with plug-in solar. And that was the officially registered numbers. And so, and I just look at that market and I say, okay, why is that market doing what it's doing and how do we replicate that here in the US? And it wasn't clear that we could be successful in the US. And I don't know if we haven't fully finished that work obviously here in the US, but I could see it. So I think in another 6 months, we'll know, did we pass California or not? Did we pass New York or not? Did we get a critical number of states where manufacturers can really make a system that's designed from the US market, from the ground up, which we don't have today. So again, that's my particular flavor of entrepreneurship that I think I'm well suited for, and everyone has their own way of doing it. Good question.
Yes. Hi, I'm Lola. Thank you for being here. What other bottlenecks do we need to solve in parallel or after this legislative session?
Permitting and tenant rights will be two really big, issues. I think tenant rights to me is probably the really big fight that I'm passionate about, because I think for a lot of people, if you're a renter and your landlord doesn't allow you to do this, it will stymie the growth of it. And I think because you have a mismatch of incentives, right? The landlord has the renter paying for their own energy, and so the landlord doesn't care if your energy bills are $200 a month, but at the same time, the landlord will care if you damage their electrical system. And so there's a mismatch between incentives for tenants and landlords, and I think getting that right in policy will really help this take off and create that more equitable future. So I'm really interested in that after we work on the interconnection side of things. And then permitting is a really, really tangled knot. And so we probably won't try to do that ourselves. And in fact, we've always had a lot of nonprofits. You develop these coalitions and you work with various different types of organizations. And that one, I think we're going to really lean on other organizations to help us with that.
I think we have time for one last question. Anyone from this side? Not to be ignored. Great, we've got one.
Sure.
Oh, go ahead.
I would like to have a closer question. Mine might be a good question.
Good collaboration.
Around like a call to action. So,
Yeah.
sorry, I'm home.
Hi. Hope.
And I know on the Bright Saver website, there were some awesome resources around state-specific toolkits of writing letters in support of certain policies, etc. Could you just walk us through what we as individuals can do and what Bright Saver is doing around getting more of individual level action brought together as a collective whole?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think I've learned that at the state legislative level, the number of calls that a state lawmaker gets about a bill is tiny. Most bills, nobody knows. California probably has hundreds of bills that are going through the process right now, and you'd be hard pressed to name even 2 of them, at this point in time, probably. Or at least for me, I can't. And so the lawmakers, when they even get 10 phone calls or emails is probably a little bit more, but if they get 10 phone calls about a bill that is being considered, that puts it on their radar screen. So it is. That's probably one of the things that we're trying to make a much bigger investment now. Like before, we really focus on the media and the narrative of telling the story of what is plug-in solar, what are the benefits of it, how does it work. But now it's really turning people out to call their state legislators and make them aware of this bill. And it doesn't take that many calls. Frankly, if everyone in this room called their various state legislators, like it would make a massive, massive difference.
Yeah. Great call to action. Everyone can make a difference here. So, well, first I want to say I'm really impressed. I think what you've done in terms of finding a new solution, trying to overcome the barriers and just rolling up your sleeves is really impressive. It's a real inspiration. So I want to say a big thank you to Kevin for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
And do you have a couple of minutes in case people want to ask?
Yeah, absolutely. I can
Kevin
stick around for a little bit in case there's any questions.
Fantastic. Well,
thanks for having me,
everyone.
everyone.
Thank you again, Kevin.